Tensions are rising in the Western Pacific. That sentence, short and stark, captures why mariners, diplomats and defense planners alike are watching a stretch of ocean that sits at the crossroads of trade, sovereignty and strategic competition. In recent days, a large naval formation centered on an aircraft carrier has been reported operating closer to waters associated with the Philippines. The presence of such a group has renewed scrutiny across a region where sea lanes converge and where multiple countries maintain overlapping interests and claims. A carrier group is unmistakable at sea. It is a mobile command post, a floating airfield and a logistical hub all in one. When one moves through sensitive maritime areas, it naturally draws attention because of its scale and the range of operations it enables. That attention is amplified in the waters surrounding the Philippine archipelago, an area of outsized importance for both commerce and contention. These passages connect major trade routes that crisscross the Indo-Pacific and sustain economies far beyond the littoral states. Officials and analysts point out there is a pattern to many such movements. Training cycles, seasonal deployments, and readiness rotations often account for concentrated activity. Surface ships, air units, and support vessels routinely coordinate to practice communications, sustainment, and maneuvers. Still, in regions with overlapping territorial claims or differing interpretations of maritime boundaries, routine operations can be interpretations, can be interpretations. Regional authorities in the Philippines have acknowledged increased maritime activity nearby, but statements from Manila have been measured. The language has emphasized observation and coordination with partner nations rather than escalation. That restraint suggests a deliberate approach: monitor closely, share information, and work through established channels to reduce the risk that any single encounter becomes a flashpoint. Allied naval forces in the region have also increased their situational awareness patrols. These patrols are framed as efforts to preserve open sea lanes and to ensure freedom of navigation in international waters. They are, in effect, a message of presence and of intent, a demonstration that important maritime corridors remain accessible and that multiple actors are committed to predictable operations at sea. Transparency and communication come up repeatedly when maritime tensions rise. Diplomatic exchanges have been renewed not to solve every underlying difference, but to manage daily interactions at sea. The focus is on maintaining stability and on ensuring movements comply with international maritime rules and established navigation norms. In practice, that means sharing information on planned exercises, using standard identification and communication protocols, and keeping diplomatic hotlines and military-to-military contacts open so that routine operatio do not spiral into incidents. Technological systems underpin much of the monitoring that makes this possible. Coastal radar, maritime domain awareness networks, automatic identification system data, and patrol aircraft together create a composite picture of who is where and when. Those systems allow local maritime agencies and international partners to track movements in near real time and to flag patterns that merit closer scrutiny. They also make it harder for large formations to operate without being observed, a fact that paradoxically can both reassure and alarm neighboring states. The strategic calculus behind carrier deployments is multifaceted. Beyond training and operational readiness, a carrier group can be a tool of strategic signaling. It can communicate priorities and reach without the bluntness of direct confrontation. Analysts say such movements demonstrate operational capability across different maritime environments and can be interpreted as efforts to reaffirm presence in key maritime zones. For the country deploying the carrier, those messages can be intended for domestic, regional, and global audiences, simultaneously projecting power, assuring allies, and signaling to potential competitors. At the same time, the presence of multiple naval assets from different countries in confined maritime areas increases the complexity of day-to-day coordination. Airspace management above the sea becomes more complicated when carrier air wings are operating near patrol aircraft and commercial air traffic. Surface tracks may cross, and the simple task of distinguishing between routine maneuvers and deliberate provocation can become fraught. This is precisely why the language of restraint professionals focused on avoiding misunderstandings is so often invoked. Incidents at sea, while rare relative to the volume of daily maritime traffic, have outsized consequences when they do occur. A misread maneuver or an accidental close approach can rapidly elevate tensions between naval commanders, trigger emergency diplomatic consultations, and produce headlines that harden public rhetoric. For that reason, rules of the road, including the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea and other confidence-building measures, remain central to risk reduction. These frameworks are designed to give mariners predictable responses and to institutionalize communication channels so that an unplanned contact does not become the start of a crisis. The Philippines occupies a central place in this maritime geography. Its location places it near vital sea corridors that carry not only regional traffic, but global commerce. For Manila, any increased naval activity in nearby waters is watched not solely for implications to sovereignty, but equally for the potential to disrupt commerce, fisheries, and the safety of seafarers. Local maritime agencies, from Coast Guard units to naval surface and air elements, are tasked with maintaining surveillance, providing navigational warnings, and working with international partners to ensure that transit lanes remain open and safe. For allies operating in the Indo-Pacific, coordination with regional partners is both practical and symbolic. Patrols, exercises, and port calls build interoperability and reassure smaller states of shared commitments to maritime security. These activities, often conducted with an explicit emphasis on de-escalation, are intended to show readiness and resolve without crossing the threshold into confrontation. They are also exercises in diplomacy, visible, routine, and carefully calibrated so that presence itself becomes a stabilizing factor. Still, the broader geopolitical context matters. The Indo-Pacific has seen increased maritime activity over the past decade as navies modernize and expand their operational reach. That rise in capability has made encounters more frequent, and it has raised questions about how states will manage competition in the sea domain. Where legal sea, LAMs overlap, or where resource access is at stake, even routine deployments can be cast as strategic maneuvers with wider implications. Maritime security experts caution against over-interpreting a single movement. Carriers and their escorts operate on schedules that can be planned months in advance. Training cycles, maintenance windows, crew rotations, and logistical considerations all shape when and where a formation might appear. But experts also acknowledge that timing and location are part of strategic messaging. Operating near a partner state or in a contested corridor carries communicative weight. It is as much about signaling to adversaries and partners as it is about tactical training. Communication between maritime authorities in the region and between those authorities and external partners remains a critical stabilizing element. Active channels enable authorities to clarify intentions, deconflict operations, and issue advisories that keep commercial traffic informed. Here those channels are robust and used frequently, the chance of miscalculation declines. Where they are weak or underutilized, uncertainty grows. Public messaging from governments reflects this balance. Statements tend to be cautious, emphasizing observation, monitoring, and the need to adhere to established maritime frameworks. There is an intentional avoidance of inflammatory language. The public posture is one of watchfulness, not immediate alarm, as officials gather information and coordinate responses through diplomatic and military mechanisms. At the same time, the capabilities represented by a carrier group underscore why so many actors value predictable rules and transparent behavior at sea. Carriers bring long-range aviation, command and control assets, and extensive logistics, enabling sustained operations far from a nation's home ports. Their ability to project air power and to support long-range operations means that their movement through a strategic waterway is newborn true. Far just a local matter, it has regional resonance. The risk calculus also includes non-state factors. Commercial vessels, fishing fleets, and civilian aircraft all share the maritime commons with naval units. Their safety depends on professional conduct by all actors, on predictable navigation practices, and on reliable information about the presence of military assets. Losing sight of that civilian dimension would be a strategic error. Maritime security is inextricably linked to the safety of trade and the livelihoods of coastal communities. Looking ahead, the pattern is likely to continue. As nations seek to maintain credible maritime forces, deployments that combine training, presence missions, and signaling will remain part of routine operations. The persistent challenge will be managing proximity, making sure that professional conduct, real-time communication, and adherence to norms keep competition from becoming confrontation. In practical terms, that means reinforcing both technical capacities and human ties, Continued investment in maritime domain awareness systems helps provide the shared situational picture that makes coordination possible. Regular exercises and officer exchanges build habits of communication and deepen understanding of each other's procedures. At the diplomatic level, consistent engagement, even when it does not resolve underlying disputes, builds the trust needed to manage day-to-day interactions at sea. The current concentration of naval assets near Philippine waters is thus a moment that reflects broader trends. Increased naval presence across the Indo-Pacific, a strategic emphasis on sea control and presence, and an appreciation of how much depends on disciplined behavior at sea. For now, there have been no reported direct incidents between the forces operating in the region. Communication lines, at least publicly, remain active, and the emphasis for most involved parties is on monitoring and coordination. Still, observers and participants alike are mindful that the seas can carry surprise. The best defense against unwanted escalation is a combination of clear procedures, continuous dialogue, and a shared understanding that the cost of miscalculation is high. That requires both technical systems that make movements observable and institutional habits that turn observation into information sharing rather than into suspicion. The maritime domain has always been contested and cooperative in equal measure. It is a space where national interests collide with global interdependence, where sovereign claims sit alongside the realities of commerce and navigation. Managing those tensions is a persistent task that requires steady attention, professional conduct, and a willingness to keep talking even when positions diverge. To sailors on deck, diplomats in conference rooms, and citizens watching from the shoreline, the message from this episode is clear. Presence at sea will continue to be a feature of regional strategy, but the manner in which that presence is exercised matters. When officials urge transparency, call for reducing misunderstandings, and emphasize adherence to established maritime frameworks, they are not speaking abstractly. They are pointing to the practical tools that make it possible for different navies and the countries behind them to coexist without turning competition into crisis. In the coming days and weeks, attention will remain on movement and movement. Observers will watch where formations go, how long they stay, and how neighboring states respond. But the deeper question is less about a single deployment and more about how the region chooses to manage persistent overlapping interests in shared waters. If professional conduct, open lines of communication, and predictable norms continue to guide behavior at sea, then even robust naval activity can be managed without escalation. If those elements falter, even routine operations can take on disproportionate strategic meaning. For now, the priorities are familiar. Keep the sea lanes open, ensure the safety of mariners, sustain diplomatic dialogue, and maintain the professional practices that reduce the risk of miscalculation. In a maritime environment where the scale of assets and the pace of activity have both increased, those priorities are the bedrock of regional stability.